Hello everyone, welcome to HFY Beyond Terror. This channel is all about HFY and sci-fi stories, where humanity's underestimated and then proves.
For 312 orbital cycles, the Lithari Directorate had watched its own tomorrow collapse. It didn't happen in wars or asteroid strikes. It happened in nurseries. Every hatchling came into the world radiant skin like frosted glass lit from within, eyes bright with the first spark of awareness. For the first few hours, the infants were perfect. Their vital spirals were steady. Their neural harmonics were clean. Their tiny hands curled around nothing, as if already grasping the future their people had promised them. Then the restlessness began. At first, the doctors called it a transient surge, a harmless flare in immature metabolism. But the surge didn't crest and fade. It escalated. A hatchling's inner light would stutter and intensify. Their hearts raced as if fleeing an invisible predator. Their muscles trembled, not with weakness but with frantic power. They would not sleep. They could not, no matter what chemical cocktail, no matter what temperature curve, no matter what precision-tuned cradle song the Directorate synthesized from mathematical ratios. By the end of a single day, the monitors always reached the same conclusion: a hard line, an empty waveform, a tone that seemed to last forever. The Directorate named it the quieting, a polite term for a terror that had no politeness in it at all. A plague that did not scar skin or cloud lungs, but burned from the inside like a star that refused to dim. The Lithari were not a people accustomed to unsolved problems. They were the architects of silent engines that bent gravity with elegance. They cultivated cities arranged in flawless tessellations, each avenue a proof, each tower a theorem. They had pared away what they called noise, impulse, sentiment, grief until their society ran smooth as polished stone. Logic, they believed, was compassion at scale. And still their infants died. In the high assembly hall, where the Directorate's elder minds sat like unmoving statues, Counselor Prime Viren listened to the latest report with a face of patient contempt. "We will correct the error," he said, as if the universe were a machine that only required the right wrench. Across the semicircle, Dr. Leora Sen did not sit. She stood because she could not bear the chair's stillness. As director of the Hatchery Continuance Program, she carried the quieting like a personal indictment. Each failure had carved a hollow in her, an absence her people insisted was simply misallocated focus. Leora had learned not to argue with Varen in public. He wasn't merely a political leader. He was an era. He embodied the Directorate's deepest fear: contamination. To him, anything unmeasured was a threat, and anything emotional was unmeasurable. Especially humans. Earth remained quarantined on the Directorate's charts, flagged as volatile, a world of unpredictable weather, untidy ecosystems, contradictory behaviors. Humans were permitted on Lithari stations only in controlled numbers, only in menial roles, always tracked. They cleaned ventilation shafts, hauled waste, repaired exterior plating in silence. Useful like a tool. Dangerous like a tool left unsheathed. Leora's latest petition had been rejected that morning, a request to broaden research beyond Directorate methodologies, to observe other species' early life caregiving. The reply had been concise: unnecessary, undignified, non-essential. Now the final hatchery remained. Hatchery 9, sealed beneath the assembly hall itself, contained 3 living infants, the last 3 births in an entire generation. The last 3 chances for the Directorate to become more than a museum of perfection. The alert arrived as a gentle chime, the sort reserved for catastrophes that could not be allowed to frighten anyone. Heads turned in perfect unison. The main projection sheet unfurled from the ceiling like a blade. Containment breach, Hatchery 9. Varen's eyes narrowed. Display. The feed resolved into grainy monochrome. Sterile walls. A row of biocradles, each a masterpiece of engineering. Floating arms. Microclimate shells. Sensors fine enough to measure the shift of a single ion. And then, impossibility. A human sat on the hatchery floor. Not a soldier. Not a saboteur draped in explosives. A worker in a plain maintenance uniform, back against the wall as if he'd simply run out of strength and chosen the nearest place to stop. His shoulders rose and fell slowly. On his chest, bundled against him, were the 3 Lithari infants. They were asleep. For a moment, the assembly hall did not breathe. The infants' inner light, usually spiking in erratic flares, glowed with an even, steady warmth. Their limbs were slack, their faces smooth. No tremors. No frantic twitching. The monitors in the corner of the feed still ran, but their graphs looked calm, like a lake that had finally found its surface. Varen's voice cut the silence. Identify the intruder. An aide's fingers flickered across a console. Human designation, Rowan Halla. Custodial assignment. Level, low access. Status file, compliant. Remove him, Varen snapped. Secure the infants for sterilization. We do not know what he has introduced. A ripple traveled through the council, disgust, fear, and something else that none of them had a vocabulary for anymore. Leora moved without permission to her own terminal, pulling up the hatchery's live vitals. Her mind was a machine built for pattern recognition, and what she saw made that machine stutter. Heart rates, lowered, synchronized. Thermal output, stable. Metabolic flux, reduced from runaway burn to a manageable hum. Neural harmonics, not chaotic, but layered slow waves rising and falling like tides. It was not sedation. It was not collapse. It was real, restorative sleep. This isn't an attack, Leora said, her voice loud enough to offend the room. It's stabilization. Varen didn't look at her. Your conclusion is premature. The data is not ambiguous. Leora forced herself to speak in the language the Directorate respected. Evidence, not plea. If we remove them now, their flux will spike. They will die. Or they will survive uncorrupted, Varen countered. We will not gamble our species on the habits of a chaotic world. Leora's hands curled into fists at her sides. She felt the old, disallowed heat in her chest, an energy not unlike the infant's fatal surge, but aimed outward. Counselor Prime, she said, for 300 cycles we have gambled on our own methods. Our wager has been extinction. A few heads tilted. The movement was subtle, the Lithari version of shock. Varen's gaze finally pinned her. You are advocating for contamination. I am advocating for observation. Leora swallowed. Let us watch him. 10 minutes. If the metrics worsen, I will authorize removal myself. The hall's silence thickened. Protocol demanded immediate action. But protocol had also delivered a graveyard. At last, a senior counselor old enough to have overseen the first expansion fleet spoke softly. 10 minutes, he said, as if testing the word's taste. We can afford 10 minutes. Varen's jaw tightened. He gave a sharp, economical nod. 10. Security units remained in the corridor outside Hatchery 9, weapons primed, but they did not breach. The feed continued. Inside the hatchery, Rowan Halley looked down at the sleeping infants like a man afraid to blink. He had no idea that an empire's leaders were watching him. He didn't know what Hatchery 9 meant, or that these 3 bundles were the last thread holding an entire civilization to the future. He only knew what he had heard. He'd been scrubbing a maintenance channel when the sound reached him through the vents. High, thin cries. Not alarms. Not machinery. Something living in distress. Rowan's hands had gone still. The sound had hooked into him with a violence that surprised him. Years ago, on Earth, He'd learned that particular kind of cry, the kind that didn't mean hunger or discomfort, but panic, pain, and exhaustion. The kind that made your bones want to run toward it. He had followed it, breaking rules the way drowning people break water. The hatchery doors should have refused him. They should have sealed, shocked, summoned guards. Instead, he'd found a maintenance override panel left open in oversight, a technician's mistake, a crack in the directorate's belief that perfection was impermeable. And then he had seen them. 3 tiny luminous bodies in their immaculate pods, thrashing as if the air itself were hurting them. Automated arms hovered nearby, offering nutrient gel on schedule, adjusting humidity in microscopic increments, doing everything except the one thing Rowan's entire species had learned before it learned language. Hold them. He had deactivated the cradles with shaking hands, expecting an alarm that would bring rifles. None came. Perhaps the system did not consider touch a threat worth monitoring. He had lifted the first infant so light it felt like a handful of warm glass. Its body vibrated with frantic energy. Instinctively, Rowan had pressed it to his chest. The baby's light pulsed hard against his shirt, like a heart trying to break free. Then he had done what his grandmother used to do when storms rattled their windows and sleep wouldn't come. He hummed, low and steady, a tune without words, more vibration than melody. His chest resonated with the sound. Underneath it, his own heartbeat kept time slow, stubborn, alive. The infant's trembling softened. Rowan had stared at it, startled, and then reached for the others. He gathered all 3 as carefully as if the universe might crack. Now on the feed, one infant stirred. Its fingers splayed. A small startled squeak escaped it, and the monitors spiked just slightly. In the assembly hall, Viren straightened. There, the damage begins. Leora leaned closer to her screen, breath caught. Rowan did not panic. He shifted the infant higher, tucking its head beneath his chin where his pulse was. Strongest. He murmured softly, not words the translation software could parse into anything meaningful, just a stream of gentle nonsense and reassurance. "It's okay," he whispered. "I've got you. You're safe." The infant's light flared once, then settled. Its tiny body slackened against him. The spike on the monitor eased back into the calm curve of sleep. Leora's mind raced, building a theory from live evidence. She pulled up overlays, Rowan's thermal signature against the infant's, his heartbeat frequency against their cardiac rhythm. Her fingers moved fast, not from panic but from the exhilaration of finally seeing a pattern that led somewhere. "Counselor Prime," she said, pointing to the data projected beside the video feed. "Our cradles are flawless environments isolated. But isolation is not safety for a developing nervous system. His body provides constant warmth that fluctuates in natural micro-variations. That variability is a signal, living presence, not mechanical precision." She switched to the acoustic readout. "The humming sits in a low band we never tested because we eliminated environmental sound as noise. But vibration is not noise. It's regulation. The infants are in training to it." Then she brought up the cardiac overlay. Rowan's heartbeat as picked up by the hatchery's most sensitive sensors, layered over the infant's rhythms. 3 jagged, frantic lines gradually aligning into something smoother. "Look," Leora said, quieter now, almost reverent. "Their metabolism is a feedback loop of alarm. Each internal surge accelerates the next. His heartbeat is an external metronome, a calm reference point they can follow until their own systems learn the pattern." The room's stillness changed. Not less sterile sterility was habit, but less certain. An elder counselor lifted a hand to his face, brushing at moisture with a gesture so small it could have been a glitch. Leora saw it anyway. Evidence came in many forms. Varen stared at the screen as if willpower could turn the scene into something else, something clean, something that did not threaten his worldview. But the monitors did not lie. For once, logic refused to support his fear. After the 10 minutes passed, the infants were still asleep. After 20, their metrics looked better than any Lithari record in 300 cycles. Finally, Varen spoke, and the words sounded as if they had been pulled from him by force. "Dr. Sen," he said, "go to the hatchery." Security protested, but he silenced them with a look. "Unarmed. If this is a trick, we will learn that as well." Leora walked through the corridor outside Hatchery 9 with her spine rigid, her thoughts spinning so fast they felt like flame. The guards parted without speaking. The door recognized her and slid open with a whisper. Warm air met her warm, not precisely regulated. The hatchery smelled faintly of human detergent and something else, living skin. Rowan looked up, eyes wide, guilt and terror written plainly across his face. He shifted as if to stand, then stopped, afraid to jostle the sleeping infants. I'm sorry," he began, words tumbling. "I heard them crying. I didn't think. I know I wasn't supposed to." Leora held up a hand. She did not look at him at first. She looked at the infants, at the soft glow nestled against the fabric of his uniform, at the rise and fall of their tiny bodies as they breathed in sync with his. When she finally met Rowan's gaze, she realized how tired he looked, not the fatigue of labor alone, but the deep, hollow weariness of someone who had lost something precious and learned to keep living anyway. "Do not apologize," Leora said, and the sentence felt strange in her mouth. "You did what we could not." Rowan swallowed. "I just held them." Leora stepped closer, slowly, as if approaching a sacred machine she didn't fully understand. "Teach me," she said. "Not the procedure. The why." Rowan blinked. "Because they needed it," he said, baffled, as if there were any other possible answer. "Because babies aren't meant to be alone." The words landed like a meteor in Leora's carefully constructed universe. In the cycles that followed, the Directorate rewrote its definition of perfection. They kept their engines and their mathematics. They did not abandon logic, they expanded it. They admitted that some variables were not solved by eliminating noise, but by learning which forms of noise were actually signals: warmth, scent, rhythm, voice. They built new hatcheries that did not isolate, but supported contact. They designed living lounges where caregivers could sit for hours, skin to skin, heart to heart. They developed training programs not for technicians, but for holders, a position that quickly became the most honored work in the Directorate. Not because it was complex, but because it was essential. Humans were invited openly, not as tools but as partners. Volunteers came from Earth: nurses, parents, grandparents, people with patient hands and steady breathing. Some brought songs, others brought silence and gentle rocking. The Directorate, once embarrassed by sentiment, found itself studying it like a fundamental force. And the infants, Lithari infants, began to live. They slept. They grew. Their inner light stabilized into a steady glow, no longer a wildfire seeking fuel. Counselor Prime Viren never fully liked the change. He did not suddenly become tender, but he learned something he could not unlearn. The universe did not care about his preferences. Evidence had humbled him. Leora Sen became the architect of a new kind of civilization, one that still valued precision, but no longer worshipped isolation. She wrote the first formal doctrine of co-regulation, a paper that ended with an unprecedented line: "We thrive by connection." Rowan Hale, the quiet custodian, did not seek reverence. When the Directorate tried to build a statue, he refused. "Just make sure the kids are okay," he said, and went back to the hatchery, settling into a chair with 3 luminous infants against his chest. Sometimes he hummed his grandmother's tune. Sometimes he didn't have to. The quieting ended not with a weapon or a grand discovery, but with a simple, ancient truth the Directorate had engineered out of their lives. A living heart can teach another heart how to be still.